Yes, before we get into the non-physical world, the spiritual world, um, finish off the Einsteinian world. Now, Einstein says in his general theory of relativity that time slows down as you approach a large mass. So, for instance, if you approach a black hole, time almost stops. But the other thing about time is time slows down the faster you go. To see that, you just really have to do another thought experiment. You have a friend that's going on a trip and you say, well, take the train, and when the train goes 100 miles an hour, get up to the front and throw the baseball 100 miles an hour. Forgetting about friction, how fast does it go then? Well, it'll go 200 miles an hour. But wait till the train goes 3/4 the speed of light, and then go up and throw it 3/4 the speed of light. How fast does the ball go then? Can't go 1.5 times the speed of light, because the speed of light is constant, 10 to the 10 centimeters per second. Something's got to give. Now, your distance is equal to how fast you go and how long you go. D equal VT. But your velocity can't go past the speed of light. So something's got to change. Your time, it has to compensate. It has to go slower the faster you go. So in the Einsteinian world, then both time and space change. Now, was Einstein given a well, okay, let's just review then what's happened so far. There are all sorts of steps that you had to go through for you to be here. First of all, your mother and dad had to meet and also had to produce you. And then their mother and dad, your granddad and your grandfather had to meet and produce you. So you are a quarter physically, you're a quarter of each of them. And over 100 years, that's 4 generations, 16 different people. And you make up your DNA. So you're part of 16 people. And over a million years, that'll be 16,000 people that you're a part of. And also, you're on a planetary system, and there's now, I think, is it 9 or 8? I forget. Pluto's just been demoted to a dwarf planet. And there is the only place that we know of that life exists. Now, it's in the right Goldilocks position. It's not too hot and not too cold. If it was any closer, then the water would evaporate, and we think that water is necessary for life. And if it was any farther away, it would be ice, and we think that it has to be liquid water. A guy called Carl Sagan, he tried to search for life in outer space. SETI, SETI, search for extraterrestrial intelligence, by looking at radio signals from the outer space and finding something that could only be reproduced by something intelligent. Yet to find it, but he also sent out, put on the Voyager spacecraft 2 gold plates, 2 different Voyagers, with the location of the Earth. He used triangulate on quasars. Quasars are neutron stars that flash, and so if anyone in the future saw these, they'd know that at least we existed. He also put on several different languages of people on the Earth. He wrote a documentary called Cosmos, which explains a lot of the different things that I'm talking about here, how the world came into existence. He also coined the phrase, you are stardust. But really, everything but your hydrogen is stardust. But we'll forgive him for that. And he looked at he said the Earth is like a pale blue spot. You look out in the darkness of space and you see this pale blue dot, blue because it's water, and everything else is dark. And everything that anybody ever thought of, did, or whatever, is on that little dot. And he likened it to an organism. So if part of the organism isn't working well, then the whole organism isn't working well either. Neil deGrasse Tyson, he was a scientist that has many talks on many different scientific topics. Is narrating another Cosmos with 10 or more episodes, which updates everything that Carl Sagan. And he was inspired by Carl Sagan as well. So as far as we know, the only life that has been discovered so far is on Earth. Of course, they're sending up satellites now that look for planets in the Goldilocks position, and they found out that most stars do have planets. So it's probably more planets than there are stars. And they're trying to find the planets that are in the Goldilocks position. But just recently, they've discovered that in our own solar system, there possibly could be microscopic life, because the dwarf planets, and there's probably more dwarf planets than there are planets, a lot of them are covered with ice. And under ice, there may be liquid water. And the same with many of the moons of the planets. So it's possible that there's at least microbes within the solar system. So far, I haven't found any. And also looking at Mars, it has used to have water. You can see the canals, which were rivers. So at one time, there might have been life on Mars. Now, Mars is smaller than Earth, and so the core would have cooled quicker, so it wouldn't have a molten core, and therefore wouldn't maintain the electromagnetic shield around to maintain the atmosphere. So that could be why it might have had life in the past. Also, Mars is not as big, therefore it wouldn't have quite the gravitational pull to keep the atmosphere intact. But it is possible, but so far we have not found any. There's water on Mars. Yeah. And there's even water on the moon as far as that goes. So it's possible there is other life. But so far, at least a complex life, you're the only thing here on that we know of in the universe. And then you're on a solar system or a star, which is one of 200 billion other solar systems, possibly. And that is on in a galaxy, Milky Way. And that Milky Way is in one galaxy of maybe 200 billion galaxies in the universe. And going back to 389 years, thereabouts, after the Big Bang, that's where you got all your hydrogen. But in between that and when the solar system was created, 4.6 billion years ago, that's where you got all your other atoms. So you could have an atom, a carbon, say, in one finger, that's 12 billion years old, created in a particular star in our solar system, in a particular galaxy, and another carbon in another finger, or even the same finger, that's from a different solar system and a different galaxy. Say one is maybe 12 billion years old, and the other carbon atom could be 6 billion years old. So all those different events had to happen before you could be here. And then, of course, at 1 second after the Big Bang, you got all your matter. You had 1 in a billion chances of doing that. Because if had any antiparticles in you, you and the rest of the universe would be all energy. It wouldn't exist. Then within the first second, sir, you got your force of gravity, keeps you on the ground. You've got the weak force, which protects you from all the solar and cosmic radiation, and protects the atmosphere, which lets you breathe, and also stops a lot of, or mitigates a lot of the all the asteroids, comets, meteorites, and meteors from coming in and then perhaps hitting you. And then, of course, you're at 10 to the minus 12 seconds. You got particles and antiparticles. And then, of course, at 1 Planck time. That's where everything seems to start, as far as science is concerned. But what happened before that? Was there something infinite that created the finite? Now, there's even speculation there may be multiverses, but that's just speculation. There's no proof, and there's no empirical evidence to support that. So all these events then that happen to, otherwise you wouldn't be here. And so it's somewhat miraculous that you made it through all that to get here. So all these events then, and the universe itself now, as I say, if there's a multi-universe, well, no one has gone into a different universe and come back to talk about it, at least. Now, science does not have the answers then for a lot of fundamental questions. For instance, why are all the constants and all the forces exactly the way they are? Because if they were any different, you wouldn't be here. One example would be the gravity. If the gravity was any lighter or not as strong, it wouldn't have been able to concentrate all the hydrogen after the hydrogen was created to form stars. So everything in the universe would just be hydrogen. If it was any stronger, then once the hydrogen was produced, it would be the gravity would force it back together into maybe a big crunch. So why is that particular force exactly what it is? Now, one of the most constants that I really don't understand is the cosmological constant. This is the constant that Einstein put in his general theory of relativity, lambda, which would allow the universe to expand or contract. Now, he took it out because, like everyone else at the time, he thought, well, the universe doesn't expand or contract. It just is. It always has been and always will be. But then when Hubble saw that the stars were expanding, stars were going away, including so that the universe was expanding, he said, well, it's one of the biggest mistakes that he's in his career. And the biggest mistake was thinking it was a mistake in the first place to put it in. And why do they... So they looked at see how fast the universe is expanding. They figured, well, it must be slowing down. Gravity would eventually slow it down, bring it to a halt, and maybe even force it back into a big crunch. Attract it back so that it would be a big crunch. And to their surprise, they found that not only was it not slowing down, it was accelerating. And therefore, they needed the lambda, or the cosmological constant, to explain that. Now, they hypothesize that space is not empty. It is full of virtual particles and virtual antiparticles. Now, of course, it has to be a hypothesis because you can't really, they may call it a theory, but you can't really bring it back into a lab because if it's virtual, it doesn't exist. And then when the universe gets bigger, more space, there's more antiparticles and particles, and when they combine, they form energy. So energy, which they call dark energy, because they don't know what it is winning over gravity. And when they look at it, I said, okay, let's theorize, and based on all our knowledge of all our equations and so on, and see what it really is, and then look at and see what we can measure. And they're out by 10 to the 120th. So that's the biggest mistake you'd ever think of. So do they really know what's really happening at the fundamental level if they come up with something that discrepancy that large? So again, science doesn't have all the answers to how you got here. No, it doesn't have, as I say before, why there is one extra particle left over after 1 second. Because if there weren't that one particle, then the universe couldn't exist because it would be all energy. And when they take it back to the lab, they always, when they try to convert energy into matter, always have the same number of particles and antiparticles. So again, that's something that science doesn't understand. Now they need the dark energy to explain 70% of the universe. So they're in the dark, at least 70%, and also another 20% they need because they need more gravity. So they need more mass. When you look at a skater and it spins, a skater spinning, they go slower when they put their hands out or arms out, and they go faster when they tuck them in. And of course, when Pluto goes around the sun, it goes much slower than Mercury that goes around the sun. So when they looked at the center of the galaxy, which is a black hole, usually, they found that the stars on the outside weren't behaving as they should. They needed 4 or 5 times as much gravity or as much mass as they could account for. And so they don't know what it is, so they call it dark matter. Can't see it. It doesn't react to the electromagnetic signals at all, X-rays, light, and everything. And it isn't composed of quarks or atoms or molecules. So they call it dark matter. And they need about that to account for 20% of what goes on in the universe. So not only does science not really have understand a lot of the fundamental questions, it's in the dark for 95% of the universe. And that the 5% that it does know, it has 2 different conflicting theories about how it works. They both work, but they don't know why. So they don't have really a grasp on the fundamental questions of why. Why are you here? Why the universe exists? So on. So is there something else that can explain what's going on? Well, and as I said, what about the non-physical, the mind or the spiritual? Oh, there are 2 different domains. The reason why I would want to attain that is because of an experiment that Persinger did at Sudbury, at the Laurentian University in Sudbury, Ontario, Canada. He took students, and unbeknownst to what the experiment was about, he put a helmet on, originally a hockey helmet, and put magnets on the helmet to measure the brain waves. Then he put the students in an isolation booth devoid of any electromagnetic radiation signals, and devoid of their sense of sight, sound, and touch, all their senses. And he observed the the brainwaves. He found that the right brain was becoming more active, whereas the left brain was shutting down. Then he asked the students after they came out what they experienced, and 4 out of 5 said they had out-of-body experiences. They felt that they were hovering over top their body, and they saw white tunnels of white light. They felt that someone was beside them or behind them. Some said they saw demonic creatures, and others said they saw God, and as a result, it's been nicknamed a God helmet. Now, these same experiences have been well documented with near-death experiences. And it doesn't seem to matter what religion you have, or what culture, what language, where you're from, when you're from. They all seem to have the same underlying phenomena. So is there another domain then, other than the physical? Well, most religions would say yes. Now, when you talk about religions, there's several different religions, and those that say, well, ours is the only religion, everybody else's is wrong, like the Islamic State, where they say everybody but our practices are infidels, and they are very, if they don't follow their practices, could be very serious consequences. Those who acknowledge Abraham may be just asked to leave. Others, they have to obey all the practices. That includes how they think, what they say, what they wear. Otherwise, they could be even beheaded, or women under 40 could be sold into slavery. Now, CBC, Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, journalist went to interview a prisoner in Iraq, and that's exactly what he said. But most religions now are more tolerant of other religions, and the Christian religions are ecumenical. They all have their own practices, but they nevertheless say that they acknowledge or that other religions can be correct, or can they tolerate, if not endorse, the other religions. And when you go to the one thing they all have in common, and is they all believe that there's something beyond themselves, something beyond the physical self, and something perhaps that's watching over you as well. And when you go to the Far East and Zen Buddhism, they try to divorce themselves from the physical and deal with the mind or the spiritual, if you like. And by the way, their brainwaves change when they're going through that process. We do it in the West, we call it TM, Transcendental Meditation. So is there then another domain? And can this, when explain things that science cannot? Science cannot explain the beginning of the universe, because it doesn't even say that there's any time beyond the first Planck time, or before the first Planck time. So, and it can't explain how the universe came about in terms of the particles being one more than a billion. Some say 100 billion, 100 million. So you might even say that science and religion are compatible, and you needed both to get here. Now the other thing at science, how you really got here. Well, how did the universe get here? Well, why did we get all these equations and theories and laws derived from the universe, or from reality, if you like? Before 1905, we had Newton's law of gravity, Newton's law of momentum, law of conservation of energy, law of conservation of matter, Charles' law, Bohr's law, etc. After that, we had Einstein's general theory of relativity, Einstein's particular theory of relativity, and all the mathematics that came from quantum mechanics. What if it's the other way around? That we got the universe or reality from those thoughts or those mathematics. It's created from the equations rather than the other way around. Well, we do create reality, virtual reality. We've got, you can go to a concert where they had a performer that has died, and he's up on stage as a hologram, virtual reality. The only problem is you don't know whether to clap for him or not. He's already dead. But I guess you need something a little more smarter than you, and humans, and more powerful. Maybe somebody omniscient and something omnipotent. Something that happens everywhere throughout the universe, omnipresent. Before you could create the whole universe. And this is exactly what we think of God. And something that has an infinite mind that can create something finite out of the infinite. So whether you think that there is, or that you just got here because of random accidents, fortuitous as they may be. For instance, you say, well, if you don't know something, or think you never will know something, you say, only God knows, sorry. And if something happens that is fortuitous, or something that happens that isn't deleterious, then you say, thank God that happened, or thank God that didn't happen. For instance, you could say, thank God there's a force of gravity, otherwise you would fall off the earth. Thank God the electromagnetic force is greater than the force of gravity, otherwise you'd fall through the earth, down into the center, along with everything else, maybe into a black hole, or singularity. And God only knows what that is. Thank God there's a weak force to protect you from the solar radiation, cosmic radiation, and a lot of material coming from outer space hitting you, and protect the atmosphere as well. And thank God, of course, you got all the different steps that happen as you got here, that there's one extra particle. Otherwise, you and everything else wouldn't exist. So, whether or not, as I say, you think it's all accidents, random accidents, or whether you can take it literally, and thank God. But nevertheless, it's miraculous that you're here. So, what are you? You are a miracle. End of story.